From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
It would be odd to be talking about the impeachment of a president only a month into his term. Unfortunately, with this president, it's oddly appropriate.
President Donald Trump has been in office for 36 days. There's already a growing chorus of voices calling for his impeachment. Nearly 900,000 people have signed an online petition entitled "Impeach Donald Trump Now." This comes amidst media reports that the FBI rejected a White House request to deny there were communications between the Trump campaign and Russia. We'll speak with someone who's been at the center of the unraveling of a presidency and a vote for impeachment in another era, President Richard Nixon's White House counsel, John Dean. Then, in a Democracy Now! Exclusive interview with football star Michael Bennett. He made headlines when he pulled out of an Israeli government-sponsored trip to Israel for NFL players.
I decided not to go because, doing my research on Palestine and Israel and all the things that were going on, I've seen so many similarities between the Black Lives Movement and the Palestinian movement. And I figured if I was going to go to Israel, I should be able to go see both sides. And I didn't want to be an ambassador for a certain government if I wasn't sure if I agree with everything the government was doing.
We'll speak with Seattle Seahawks football star Michael Bennett. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In North Dakota, a heavily militarized police force Thursday raided the main resistance camp set up by Lakota water protectors fighting the $3.8 billion Dakota Access Pipeline. The camp was largely vacated ahead of an eviction deadline set one day earlier by North Dakota's governor. But police arrested at least 33 people who refused to leave. Police and armored vehicles backed by National Guard soldiers later raided the nearby Rosebud resistance camp. Despite the evictions, Indigenous-led water protectors say they'll continue to oppose the pipeline. This is Navajo activist Lila June.
We actually won this movement in so many profound ways. As my Ina Cheryl says, we are seeds, and they might have buried things, but we have planted seeds all across the world and inspired and awakened people to see water in a new way, to see water as life. And we've also, for that matter, we have united things that were never united before.
Earlier this month, construction crews resumed work on the final section of the pipeline after the Trump administration granted an easement to allow Energy Transfer Partners to drill beneath the Missouri River. In Mexico, Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly insisted Thursday the U.S. would not carry out mass deportations and that President Trump's deportation program was not a military operation, contradicting a statement made by Trump just hours earlier. Kelly was on a two-day visit with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson aimed at smoothing U.S.-Mexico relations.
And again, listen to this. No, repeat, no use of military force in immigration operations. None. So again, I repeat, there will be no use of military forces in immigration.
Kelly's comments came after Trump told a gathering of corporate CEOs at the White House his deportation program was in fact a military operation.
We're getting really bad dudes out of this country, and at a rate that nobody's ever seen before. And they're the bad ones. And it's a military operation.
Mexico has rejected President Trump's pledge that he'll force Mexico to pay for an expanded wall on the U.S.-Mexico border. Mexico's foreign minister also denounced new rules authorizing the U.S. to deport undocumented immigrants to Mexico, whether or not they're Mexican citizens. President Trump suggested Thursday he's looking to expand the size of the U.S. nuclear weapons arsenal. Trump's comment came during an interview with Reuters.
It would be wonderful. A dream would be that no country would have nukes. But if countries are going to have nukes, we're going to be at the top of the pack.
The statement drew alarm from anti-nuclear activists who fear it'll touch off a new worldwide nuclear arms race. The Trump administration said Thursday it'll enforce federal laws barring the use of marijuana, reversing an Obama administration policy that gave wide latitude to states to determine their own pot laws. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said the Trump administration will prioritize enforcement in states that have passed laws allowing for the recreational rather than medical use of the drug.
But I think the Department of Justice is the lead on that. It is something that you should follow up with them, but I believe that they are going to continue to enforce the laws in the books with respect to recreational marijuana.
Meanwhile, the Justice Department said Thursday it'll reverse an Obama administration policy that would have phased out the federal government's use of private prisons. The announcement touched off a spike in the after-hours share prices of for-profit prisons, including CoreCivic and Geo Group. White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon made a rare public appearance Thursday at the Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC. Speaking alongside White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, Bannon admitted many of President Trump's cabinet picks were selected to head agencies whose mission they oppose.
The third, broadly, line of work is what is deconstruction of the administrative state. If you look at these cabinet appointees, they were selected for a reason, and that is the deconstruction. The way the progressive left runs is if they can't get it passed, they're just going to put it in some sort of regulation in an agency. That's all going to be deconstructed, and I think that that's why this regulatory thing is so important.
We had
White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon is the former head of Breitbart Media, a far-right website which frequently publishes racist, sexist, anti-immigrant and xenophobic news. His appearance at CPAC came as officials expelled white nationalist Richard Spencer from the conference Thursday. A CPAC spokesperson called Spencer's views venomous, horrible and repulsive. Breitbart has previously praised Spencer, calling him one of the leading intellectuals of the so-called alt-right movement. In Kansas, police have charged a 51-year-old man with first-degree murder after he allegedly shouted, "Get out of my country," before firing on a pair of Indian men at a restaurant in suburban Kansas City. The gunfire killed 32-year-old Srinivas Kuchibatla. His friend and a bystander who confronted the shooter were injured. Witnesses say Adam Purinton was drinking and spouted racial slurs before he opened fire. Purinton fled the scene and was arrested hours later after telling a bartender in Clinton, Missouri, he had just shot two Middle Eastern men. Police have said it's too early in their investigation to determine if they'll charge Purinton with a hate crime. In New York City, Customs and Border Protection agents met passengers as they exited a flight from San Francisco Wednesday, demanding to check their IDs. A staffer for Vice News who was aboard the flight captured photos of the incident, saying passengers were told they couldn't disembark without showing their documents. The CBP later said its agents were assisting Immigrations and Customs Enforcement in seeking a person ordered removed by an immigration judge. In Malaysia, police say a pair of women used the banned chemical nerve agent VX to assassinate Kim Jong-nam, the half-brother of North Korea's leader. Kim died of a seizure on his way to a hospital February 13th after the women doused his face with the chemical as he was waiting to board a flight at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. The United Nations has banned VX as a weapon of mass destruction. Although North Korea has denied involvement in Kim's assassination, the country is not a signatory to the Chemical Weapons Convention, is believed to have stockpiles of VX and other nerve agents. White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus sought unsuccessfully to have the FBI refute news reports that Donald Trump's campaign advisors were in frequent contact with Russian intelligence agents ahead of November's election. That's according to CNN, which reported Thursday the FBI declined to publicly corroborate Priebus's denial. Priebus's outreach to the FBI violated policies intended to limit communications between the White House and the FBI on pending investigations. We'll have more on that story with White House counsel, former White House counsel, John Dean. The Pentagon is considering a plan that would see a large contingent of U.S. troops remain in Iraq even after the planned defeat of ISIS. The chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, said Thursday the Pentagon's discussing the possibility with Iraq's government, saying the plan to extend troop deployment has no fixed end date. White House Chief Digital Officer Garrett Lansing was among 6 staffers fired by the White House after they failed an FBI background check. Lansing's the former head of the Republican Party's digital operations. According to Politico, Lansing failed due to conflicts of interest posed by his business investments. In the Philippines, police arrested an opposition senator and fierce critic of President Rodrigo Duterte today, accusing her of taking bribes from drug dealers. Senator Leila de Lima says she's innocent of any crime and called her arrest retribution for her criticism of Duterte's bloody war on drugs, which has seen police carry out thousands of extrajudicial killings.
The
truth will be out in the right time. If they think they can silence me, if they think I can no longer fight for what I'm fighting for, especially finding the truth behind the daily killings, the other issues, the pressures and tyranny under Duterte's regime, then it is my honor to get arrested because of what I'm fighting for.
Philippines President Duterte has boasted about personally murdering drug dealers. Last September, he compared himself favorably to Adolf Hitler, saying he wanted to kill millions of drug addicts. In Portugal, police have arrested a former U.S. intelligence operative and are preparing to extradite her to Italy, where she faces a prison sentence for her role in the kidnapping and rendition of an Egyptian cleric in 2003. Former undercover CIA officer Sabrina de Sousa was one of 26 Americans convicted in absentia by an Italian court in 2007. They were charged with illegally seizing the cleric, Abu Omar, from the streets of Milan in 2003 and sending him to Egypt, where he was tortured during a 4-year imprisonment. De Sousa moved to Portugal in 2015 and was arrested Monday as she attempted to leave the country. She faces 4 years in an Italian prison. Japan's Supreme Court has denied bail to a prominent activist opposed to the U.S. military's presence in Okinawa. Hiroji Yamashiro was arrested last fall on charges he cut through a barbed wire fence surrounding a U.S. base. For decades, residents have called for the expulsion of U.S. troops from Okinawa, which houses about 2/3 of the 50,000 U.S. troops currently stationed in Japan. And in Puerto Rico, thousands of university students are on strike this week, protesting imminent cuts to public education amidst an economic crisis. Puerto Rico's governor has until the end of the month to submit a budget plan to a federally appointed oversight control board with sweeping powers to run Puerto Rico's economy. The oversight board wants sharp cuts to public spending and a strategy to pay the debt to bondholders. If the demand is not met, the oversight board will make its own budget plan. On Thursday, thousands of students gathered in front of the Capitol and marched to the governor's mansion. This is graduate student Laudere Bracero Marrero.
We're here today in defense of the University of Puerto Rico, in defense of the country's public education, in defense of the education of the working class of the country, for us to be able to have an accessible and public education. We understand that the different campuses have approved different shutdowns and strategies of action to be able to protect the University of Puerto Rico that we know is decaying because of the plans of Wall Street and the plans of the government that is a puppet of whatever the Oversight Control Board says.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As of today, President Trump has been in office for 36 days. There's already a growing chorus of voices calling for his impeachment. Nearly 900,000 people have signed an online petition entitled Impeach Donald Trump Now. Thousands of protesters poured into the streets Monday for Not My President's Day marches across the country. Thousands more stormed Republican town halls this week to confront Republican leaders over their support for Trump. Even the city of Richmond, California, has joined the movement. On Tuesday, the Richmond City Council voted unanimously to approve a resolution calling on Congress to consider Trump's impeachment, arguing Trump is in violation of the Constitution's Emoluments Clause, which prohibits people holding federal office from accepting payments from foreign governments. The demand for Trump's impeachment comes as he presides over an understaffed White House in near constant crisis. This comes as White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus sought unsuccessfully to have the FBI refute news reports that Donald Trump's campaign advisors were in frequent contact with Russian intelligence agents ahead of November's election. That's according to CNN, which reported on Thursday the FBI declined to publicly corroborate Priebus's denial. Priebus's outreach to the FBI violated policies intended to limit communications between the White House and the FBI on pending investigations. Priebus denied the reports during an interview Sunday on Meet the Press.
I know what they were told by the FBI because I've talked to the FBI. I know what they're saying. I wouldn't be on your show right now telling you that we've been assured that there's nothing to the New York Times story if I actually wasn't assured. And by the way, if I didn't actually have clearance to make this comment.
Allegations of White House communications with the FBI during the investigation into Russia's influence have raised questions about whether the Trump administration has violated ethics restrictions meant to protect such investigations from political influence. They've also drawn comparisons to former President Richard Nixon's 1972 discussion with aides who used the CIA to push the FBI away from investigating the Watergate burglary that later led to Nixon's resignation. Will the constant chaos, confusion, and conflicts of interest in the Trump administration lead to President Trump's impeachment? Well, for more, we go to someone who's been at the center of the unraveling of a presidency and a vote for impeachment. That's right, President Richard Nixon's White House counsel, John Dean. He's the author of several books, including The Nixon Defense, What He Knew and When He Knew It, and Conservatives Without Conscience, as well as Broken Government, How Republican Rule Destroyed the Legislative, Executive, and Judicial Branches. John Dean, welcome to Democracy Now!
Good morning, Amy.
So we have 36 days so far into this presidency. It took a second term of office for President Nixon before the House Judiciary Committee voted on articles of impeachment against him. He would later resign, so he wasn't impeached. But can you talk about where Donald Trump is right now?
Well, what I see and hear in following it are echoes of Watergate. If you recall, Watergate ran about 900 days. In other words, it went on for years, starting with a bungled burglary at the Democratic National Committee and right up to Richard Nixon's resignation, followed by the conviction of his top aides. So it ran a long time. What we're seeing is very accelerated. It's partially responsible because of the media and the technology today, but it's also the behavior of Trump and his aides, as well as the media's vigilance on this. So we're seeing things accelerated. And what I see or hear are echoes of Watergate. We don't have Watergate 2.0 yet, but we have something that is beginning to look like it could go there.
Well, I wanted to turn right now to what took place in Richmond, California. It became the first U.S. city to call for an investigation into whether to impeach President Trump. A resolution approved by the Richmond City Council states Trump is in violation of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution, which prohibits people holding federal office from accepting payments from foreign governments. These are some of the city officials who voted unanimously in favor of the impeachment resolution.
Ordinarily, it would be odd to be talking about the, well, everything about this administration is odd, but it would be odd to be talking about the impeachment of a president only a month into his term. Unfortunately, with this president, it's oddly appropriate.
The word is very, very clear that the residents of these United States are not in alignment with his movement of hate, his movement of fear, his movement of bullying and intimidation, and his movement of just out and out lies.
Voices of the city council members in Richmond, California. Do you think what they're accusing President Trump of could lead to his impeachment?
It could lead there, Amy, if the Republicans didn't control both houses of Congress. It's a beginning. It takes a lot of momentum, much more than one city. It takes hundreds of cities. It takes really a national change of attitude about this president before we're going to have an impeachment. Right today, given the fact that the House and Senate are controlled by the Republicans, they're not going to impeach their president as long as he gives them what they want and signs into legislation or signs into law a lot of the things that they've had in their dreams for many years. They're not going to give him him any problem. So, and he's not going to give them any problem because he doesn't want to have a fight with them. So it's going to be a while. Impeachment is not a legal process. It's a quasi-legal process, but it's primarily a political process. And we're not there yet. Well, while a lot of people might like it, it's not going to happen until the political process reaches that stage.
Well, let me ask you about this latest breaking news out of CNN and also the New York Times. White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus seeking unsuccessfully to have the FBI refute news reports that Donald Trump's campaign advisors were in frequent touch with Russian intelligence agents ahead of November's election. At CNN also reporting Thursday the FBI declined to publicly corroborate Priebus's denial. Priebus's outreach to the FBI violating policies intended to limit communications between the White House and the FBI on pending investigations. And this goes back to Watergate, when you were at the White House. Can you explain what is improper here and possibly what is illegal here? And talk about your position as White House counsel at the time. What were you seeing happening there, and what these allegations, why they are so significant?
There's actually nothing illegal about talking to the FBI. Nobody has to talk to the FBI when they come to see them or knock on their door. Unless they're carrying a subpoena or acting directly for a grand jury. To my knowledge, there's no grand jury at this stage of any kind of inquiry into Mr. Trump's or his aides' conduct. So there's probably nothing overtly illegal. There is a policy that was written in the late 2000s between the FBI and anybody in the rest of the executive branch, or the Congress, for that matter, talking to them about an ongoing investigation. That appears to be the regulation that may have been violated. And what happened is one of the assistant directors pulled Priebus aside in the White House after a meeting and just said the New York Times story is a little bit overboard.
Of the FBI.
Yes, excuse me. The FBI investigation was a little bit overboard, as reported by the New York Times. And it was just a passing remark, and then Priebus tried apparently to reach back and get more out of them, and that's where he probably crossed a line, a regulatory line, not a legal line. So
this is pressuring both McCabe and then a call to the head of the FBI, Comey, to get them to publicly say that these stories about the contact between Trump's people and Russia were not true.
It was an effort on behalf of the White House that failed. Comey was not about to buy into it. He has an ongoing investigation, and he wasn't about to undercut it by giving that kind of comment to Priebus. So this investigation has to play out. And it will play out. It'll play out on Capitol Hill. It'll play out in the FBI. Russia kind of breaks down into three categories. There's the pre-election activity. Did the Trump campaign have contact with Russians and somehow know that they were hacking into the DNC and trying to hurt Hillary and help Trump? That's the first question. Then there's the period between the election and the inauguration, when Flynn was having contact with the ambassador. Did the president and who else on his staff was involved in those efforts to try to possibly undercut the Obama administration? And of course, the third big area that they're investigating is what is the truth or falsity of the dossier that appeared from the MI6 former employee, a fellow by the name of Steele, who reported what he was finding from some of his contacts in Russia, and as to whether or not Russia had compromised Donald Trump. Those are sort of the three big areas they're looking at in the Russian investigation, and any one of those could cause Mr. Trump a serious problem.
Back in 1972, you had Richard Nixon discussing with aides using the CIA to push the FBI from investigating the Watergate burglary. Were you in on those discussions?
What happened is, before that happened, I had been called over by the acting director of the FBI, Pat Gray, to have an update and a report, and I came back and reported to Haldeman what was going on. It's interesting, Amy, and I've gone through every single Watergate conversation for the book I did, The Nixon Defense, What He Knew and When He Knew It. We transcribed everything, about 600 tapes that had never been heard before. So I tracked it from the beginning to the end. And what happened in that conversation is Haldeman sort of took what I told him and pushed it much further than either Mitchell or I thought appropriate, and tried to sell the president on this as being a tool to use the CIA to cut off the FBI. Now, that was later called an obstruction of justice. I'm not sure technically it was, but what it did is it caught Richard Nixon in a lie, because he had denied he'd known anything about any cover-up until I told him much later when I started having direct dealings with him. And it was the lie that caught him more than that particular incident.
We're going to break and then come back to this discussion. We're talking to John Dean, who served as counsel to the president. That was President Nixon, author of a number of books, including The Nixon Defense, What He Knew and When He Knew It, and Conservatives Without Conscience, as well as Broken Government, How Republican Rule Destroyed the Legislative, Executive, and Judicial Branches. We'll be back with him in a minute. And then we'll go to our exclusive interview with Seattle Seahawks football star Michael Bennett, why he chose not to go on an Israeli government-sponsored trip to Israel. Stay with us.
Children tied into the drum, a newborn's tears with the river did run. An eagle cries over the drum, an ancient seed smiled into the light of the sun. Medusa's head of black snakes, tears through the loss and what remains. Reenact's dog snap between labor pains, empty words spoken.
Black Snakes by Mario Sue, here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we continue our conversation with former Nixon White House counsel John Dean. Now, speaking at CPAC on Thursday, White House Chief Strategist Stephen Bannon, who doesn't usually speak in public, threatened that Trump's declared war on the media is going to get worse.
Corporatist, globalist media that are adamantly opposed to an economic nationalist agenda like Donald Trump has. Here's why it's going to get worse, because he's going to continue to press his agenda. And as economic conditions get better, as more jobs get better, they're going to continue to fight. If you think they're going to give you your country back without a fight, you are sadly mistaken. Every day it is going to be a fight.
That is White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, the former head of Breitbart Media. We're talking to John Dean, served as counsel to President Richard Nixon. Your thoughts on what he is saying, and President Trump himself saying that the media, the press, is the enemy of the American people.
I find it very startling and very troubling. It is more Nixonian than Nixon, and I say that for this reason. Nixon made those kind of comments that we only know about because he had his secret taping system running and seemed to forget it was on. Just constantly when he was in the office, it would automatically go on. And he'd make those kind of attacks against the media, calling the media the enemy, saying that he was going to wiretap them and surveil them to find out who was leaking. He would have his top hatchet man, Chuck Colson, call the heads of the networks and read them the riot act for their coverage. So he did these things behind closed doors. The big difference is Trump is doing this right out and challenging the First Amendment that is one of our most important because it involves freedom of the press and freedom of speech. And he's taking that on head on. Anything that he doesn't like, any reporting he calls being an enemy of the people by not giving something that's laudatory to Trump and his administration. It's just ludicrous, Amy, and it's troublesome that he would try to sway the press by using the bully pulpit of his office to intimidate them. My hope is he does not, and I really don't think that, knowing the journalists I know, that he will. Nixon failed, and he had a deep reservoir of ill will to draw on when he got himself in real trouble. And I think Trump is creating the same problem for himself.
Many have compared Donald Trump's speech at the Republican National Convention in July to the one given by Richard Nixon in 1968. This is a clip.
As we look at America, we see cities enveloped in smoke and flame. We hear sirens in the night. We see Americans dying on distant battlefields abroad. We see Americans hating each other, fighting each other, killing each other at home. And as we see and hear these things, millions of Americans cry out in anguish. Did we come all this way for this?
That was President Nixon in 1968. John Dean, your thoughts on these comparisons?
Well, he was clearly, I wasn't a part of his campaign. I didn't join him until well into his first term, and he was playing scare tactics at that point, trying to make Americans vote for him as a strong man, very much like Donald Trump did in his Cleveland speech. It's the same sort of tactic. They're both authoritarian personalities, Amy, and this is a type of personality that tries to frighten people to take a strong man as their leader, and it works. No one knows for sure how many Americans are affected by this. The best guesstimates of social scientists are about 30% maybe. But it looks like Trump got more than that when he used these tactics. And it is not a healthy way to run a democracy by trying to frighten people into voting for you.
Let me turn to Donald Trump speaking in New York shortly before his inauguration, when he addressed questions about his business interests and asserted that as president he would be exempt from possible conflicts of interest.
I have a no conflict of interest provision as president. It was many, many years old. This is for presidents, because they don't want presidents getting, I understand, they don't want presidents getting tangled up in minutiae. They want a president to run the country. So I could actually run my business. I could actually run my business and run government at the same time. I don't like the way that looks, but I would be able to do that if I wanted to. I'd be the only one that would be able to do that. You can't do that in any other capacity. But as a president, I could run the Trump Organization, great company, and I could run the company, the country. I do a very good job, but I don't want to do that.
So that's Donald Trump. And, of course, President Nixon famously said if the president does it, it's not illegal.
Well, Trump is wrong. What the law says is he can't be criminally prosecuted. But a president can't be criminally prosecuted for anything, any offense. A president can theoretically shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, to use an analogy, and not be prosecuted for it. He could be impeached for it and then later prosecuted. But a sitting president, the best tradition and law we have, and lots of opinions that have come out of the Office of Legal Counsel at the Department of Justice, says he's immune from prosecution. But that doesn't mean he's immune from the law. It was anticipated that as the head of the executive branch, he would set the example for conflict of interest. Nixon, the way he handled it, he sold all of his stock, bought real estate that was very passive investment that he couldn't affect. He did get criticized later for having the Secret Service make some improvements on the property for security reasons that also were good for the value of his properties. But Trump has pushed this to a level that we've never seen, never had to cope with. And it's very troublesome because almost everything he does, and it's clear he's doing, that are helping his business. And I think at some point Americans are going to say, hey, this isn't what we had in mind. Those who did vote for him and those who didn't vote for him are going to even be more offended. So this is a bad play, and it's going to come back and haunt him.
Very quickly, John Dean, in January, as you know, Trump famously fired the acting Attorney General Sally Yates hours after she announced that the Justice Department would not defend Trump's executive order banning temporarily all refugees from the 7 countries, the famous Muslim ban. Senator Chuck Schumer referred to the firing as the Monday Night Massacre, which, of course, alludes to President Nixon and the Saturday Night Massacre. In these last seconds we have with you, talk about that and this comparison of
That, Amy, suggests to me how ignorant he is about the job he has. I don't think he has even a good newspaper knowledge of the way the presidency works. I don't think he's ever read an autobiography or biography of any of his predecessors. And what he did is indeed an example of the way Nixon handled a special prosecutor who he didn't want to pursue his own tapes at that point. So this was just a ham-handed, very early effort. They didn't need to fire her. They'd ask her to stay on as a acting attorney general. She was going to leave as soon as a permanent attorney general was confirmed. So this, I think, is just more evidence of his ignorance.
Well, we have to leave it there, and I want to thank you very much for being with us. John Dean, former counsel to the president, White House counsel to President Nixon. This is Democracy Now! When come back, a Democracy Now! Exclusive interview with Seattle Seahawks football star Michael Bennett.
Or is that really where it's at? We people who are darker than blue. This ain't no time for segregating. I'm talking about brown and yellow too. How yellow, girl, can you tell? You're just the surface of our dark, deep well. If your mind could really see, you know your
We the People Who Are Darker Than Blue by Curtis Mayfield here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we turn to our Democracy Now! Exclusive. Earlier this month, professional football star Michael Bennett made headlines when he pulled out an Israeli government-sponsored trip to Israel for NFL players. In an open letter, Bennett, who plays for the Seattle Seahawks, wrote, "One of my heroes has always been Muhammad Ali. I know that Ali always stood strongly with the Palestinian people, visiting refugee camps, going to rallies, always willing to be a voice for the voiceless. I want to be a voice for the voiceless, and I cannot do that by going on this kind of trip to Israel." Bennett's words struck a chord with his teammates. In the end, only 5 out of the original 13 players ended up traveling as ambassadors of goodwill for Israel. Well, yesterday I spoke with Michael Bennett and Dave Zirin, a sports editor for The Nation magazine. I began by asking Michael Bennett about his decision not to go to Israel.
I decided not to go because, doing my research on Palestine and Israel and all the things that were going on, I've seen so many similarities between the Black Lives Movement and the Palestinian movement. And, I figured if I was going to go to Israel, I should be able to go see both sides. And, I didn't want to be an ambassador for a certain government if I wasn't sure if I agree with everything the government was doing. So I thought it would be better to go in my own time and figure out, my own situation when I get there.
How did this trip end up getting planned?
They contacted us during the last year in the summertime, and, they were talking about this trip, and I thought it was just more of like a trip that you get to go see Israel. I didn't know it was like an ambassador trip and all the extra stuff. So, once I found out about that, some of my friends called me and was like, "Oh, did you know this and did you know that?" And when they called me, I just decided to, I was like, "Oh, well, I can't do this. I don't want to be an ambassador for something that that I don't agree with."
Michael, what kind of response did you get to posting that letter?
I think it was I felt like there were some people that thought I was anti-Semitic, and so they were like getting mad, and I was like, "No, I'm not against Jewish people or I'm not against anybody when it comes to people, but you know, they thought I was anti-Semitic, but I wasn't. You know, I was just saying that when I do go to Israel, I would love to see Palestine too. And you know, I got a lot of great things. I think a lot of people tweeted, emailed, all kinds of things and said they were proud, you know, that an athlete, you know, stood for something that was going on in the world. And I think when the things that are going on in America at the same time and things that are going around the whole world in Palestine, all across, and, you know, I just wanted to be, you know, and if I do be an ambassador, it would be for goodwill of the world, the things that are going on around the world, and they're so similar to the things that are going on in America, whether we're talking about Ferguson or we're talking about, you know, Baltimore or Eric Garner. Just, you know, there's a lot of things that are going on here that are similar to things that are going on in Palestine. And once I did so much research and started reading and seeing the similarities, I knew that I couldn't go on this trip.
You mentioned Muhammad Ali in your letter. I wanted to go to a clip of Muhammad Ali in his own words.
My conscience won't let me go shoot my brother or some darker people or some poor, hungry people in the mud for big, powerful America and shoot them for what? They never called me nigger. They never lynched me. They never put no dogs on me. They never robbed me of my nationality, raped and killed my mother and father. What, I'm going to shoot them for what? How can I go shoot them? Them little poor little black people and little babies and children and women. How can I shoot them poor people? That would just take me to jail.
That was Muhammad Ali as he protested the war in Vietnam. What does Muhammad Ali mean to you, Michael?
I think that Muhammad Ali is an inspiration for all athletes to, you know, use their platform for good. I think as an athlete, a lot of times, you know, you get caught in the marketing situation where you're marketing for so many brands that you forget that you are a person, and that there's things that's going on that with just some words that you speak, you can inspire young kids to make decisions, or you can bring awareness to things that are going on. So Muhammad Ali, he just inspires me just to be that voice for the voiceless, like, you know, to be able to use my platform. And this generation is so different from back then when, you know, protesting and rallies and all kinds of things, you had to go out and 500,000 people and, you know, and get them to follow you and do all these kind of things and share your message. But now, you know, just with the click of a button on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you can reach 1 million people and you can share your message. And when you share your message, you can change a lot of lives.
You know, the Israel trip was right around the time that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu came to the United States and had a news conference with Donald Trump. And it's the president that I want to talk to you about right now. Your thoughts on President Trump?
I mean, you know, growing up, you know, you see all these different things, and when he became the president, I was like, oh, this is really happening. I think a lot of people were shocked, and you know, me, for a man with 3 daughters, and I see the things that, you know, he talks about women, and I see the women moving and the movement, and you know, and I just don't agree with a lot of the things that he says or really does. I think, you know, you think about building a wall, you know, when America is built from immigrants and by immigrants, and a lot of things that are done by them and so many great people. I think I just disagree with a lot of his policies and his terms, and you know, I hope that he realizes that it takes everybody to have a place like America. It takes people from Chinese descent, African descent, Italian descent, Irish descent, Spanish, Native American. It takes everybody to, you know, have a country like this, and I just disagree with the way that he handles the people, you know, the women, the immigrants. I just think, you know, I don't think he thinks about the choices and the mindset that he creates for younger people that might disagree with somebody, and they just go out and they want to disrespect them for not being the same.
Your brother, Martellus Bennett, who plays for the New England Patriots, was also just in the headlines. 5 teammates of his and him, he began this all, said they won't visit the White House for the traditional Super Bowl celebration as a protest against Donald Trump. Do you support his decision? Can you talk about how he came to that and your thoughts on it as well?
I definitely support his decision. I think when a person has to deal with, you know, a lot of ridicule coming from their decision and they still make the decision, I think they're a strong person. I think, you know, I definitely agree with him for making his stand. I don't know exactly why I know he disagrees with a lot of stuff that Trump says, so I think that's the reason why he doesn't want to go, and I think he doesn't want to support something that's a system that's keeping people of color down, a systematic system that's keeping people of color down. I think he doesn't want to participate in that, and I can understand that.
You also mentioned John Carlos in your letter to the world explaining why you wouldn't go on this Israel government-sponsored trip. I wanted to go to Dave Zirin's documentary film, Not Just a Game, which features an interview with John Carlos, who famously raised his fist in a Black Power salute at the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City.
All we ask for is equal chance to be a human being. And as far as I see now, we're 5 steps below the ladder. And every time we try and touch the ladder, they put their foot on our hands and don't want us to climb up.
So that was John Carlos back then, soon after he raised his fist in the Black Power salute. And I'm going to also play a clip of John Carlos today in our studios at Democracy Now! When he came to visit us.
Mr. Smith and I, we took various artifacts out there to try and illustrate certain points that we wanted to get across to society, which we really never got a chance to expose to the general public. But we wore the black glove out there primarily because this is the first time the Olympics was in color, Technicolor. So we wanted to be no doubt as to who we were representing first. We were representing our race first, and then we was representing the United States second.
That was John Carlos describing what he did in 1968. Michael Bennett, he suffered enormously over the years. It hurt his career. He got tremendous, both criticism, but over the decades has been prouder and prouder of what he has done. What did that action mean to you? And do you feel repercussions for standing up, you know, whether we're talking about endorsements or repercussions from the NFL?
I think when John Carlos did that, I don't think the world was ready for what he did. I think now the world is ready for change. You see so many different people of all different ethnicities marching, doing everything together. And I think with technology, you know, you can share your message. I think when he did, I think, you know, repercussions of what he did, I thought, yeah, it probably hindered his career or the things that happened to him. But ultimately, like he said, I mean, I think in sports, sometimes people, you know, identify with your legacy with how many touchdowns you get, how many yards you score, how many medals you win, how many dunks you get, how many grand slams you win. But ultimately, I feel like your legacy is definitely, you know, how many kids you can reach in your community, how much change can you make? Because at the end of the day, the records are being broken, but that fist that he held up is still staying the same. It's a stagnant picture forever. People remember that fist being something. People don't remember who won the 1979 gold medal or the 1985 gold medal, but they remember that moment when he put his fist up.
We're talking to Michael Bennett, Seattle Seahawks defensive end, outspoken on everything from politics in the world to what's happening within the NFL. We're also joined by Dave Zirin, sports editor for The Nation magazine, also host of Edge of Sports. Dave, how unusual is Michael and Martellus, the Bennett brothers, I mean, in being quite fearless and speaking out?
Well, I think Michael Bennett is a person of uncommon character. I think folks hear that. But while he's a person of uncommon character, he's also a part of a wave of athletes who are speaking out right now and have been speaking out over the last several years. And I think this is happening because of a perfect storm of reasons. Everything from the influence of the Black Lives Matter movement to the influence of social media to the fact that there are just people in the streets right now absolutely fed up with what's happening both in this country and in the world. And we have to remember that athletes don't live in this hermetically sealed chamber apart from this. Like Michael Bennett spoke about, I mean, he has daughters and there is a misogynist and sexual harasser in the White House. You can't be apart from that. Or the fact that, you know, Michael Bennett is somebody who reads the work of Angela Davis. I know that about Michael. And Angela Davis just wrote a book called Freedom is a Constant Struggle that connects the issues of Ferguson and Palestine. Yeah, and we can't speak about the issue, as Angela Davis argues, we can't speak about Black Lives Matter in this country without looking at it globally. And that's what Michael Bennett did in terms of applying that political analysis to this trip. that was being sent over to hype brand Israel and create goodwill ambassadors. So these things are connected to much broader struggles, but at the same time, it still takes those individuals, just like John Carlos raising his fist in 1968, just like Colin Kaepernick taking that knee. It still takes those individuals who are willing to stand up and speak out and share with the world what it is they're learning and experiencing. And that's what makes Michael Bennet unique. But at the same time, as we're seeing, courage is contagious. So when Michael Bennet speaks out, you see the ripple effect across the NFL, across the sports world, and across sports fandom as well.
Dave just raises this issue of Colin Kaepernick, who really electrified the country. And I don't know if he started a movement, but certainly added power to a movement, the decision to take a knee during the playing of the national anthem. Michael Bennet, your thoughts on what Colin did and the effect it had on you?
I mean, to be honest, I really did think that movement would be coming from Colin Kaepernick. I thought they would probably be coming from somewhere else in the NFL. I think I was blindsided when it was him. Like, when it was him who made that decision to do it, I was like, wow, Kaepernick is like, he's like on a whole nother level right now. He's trying to change. He's trying to make a conversation about something that should have been had a conversation about a long time ago. And when he took that knee, it just made me realize that, when he did that and the way that he made people speak around the world about this, it was like, wow, athletes really do have this platform that a lot of people just want to hear. And when he made that decision to do that, I think it changed a lot of lives. I think it brought out some ugliness in people, but it also brought out some beauty in some people. And I think for me personally, it just challenged me to even join him and try to make everything in his message more. Make it where people understand it and they want to be a part of it, where young kids are speaking about it too. For me, the greatest thing about what he did wasn't that the adults were having a conversation about it. It was that the young people were having a conversation about it. It was the 10-year-old, 9-year-old teams, they're not even getting paid in the NFL, and they're fearless. They're taking a knee. They don't even know, they understand why they're taking a knee, but at the same time, they really don't understand the magnitude of what they're doing. And then you take the middle school teams that are taking a knee, and there's not even a lot of fans in the stadium, but they're taking that knee. And you see high school people doing it, and you see college people doing it, then you see guys in the NFL doing it, and it's like, man, that started a fire. And the greatest thing was that the young kids were starting to be awoke about things that were going on and more aware. And I thought that was the coolest part about all of it. It was that the young people, the seed that he planted with the young people, it started growing, and it started growing like fire and just started growing like weeds everywhere, and it was special. I think that he did something really special, and it all started with a knee, and that's the funniest part about it. And I think it was a great thing.
And you had the students at Mizzou, at the University of Missouri, Black Lives Matter activists demanding change, ultimately toppled their president when the college football team said they wouldn't play until the president left.
What those kids did was in Missouri was the truth of it all. People are the power. I think people have so much power when they connect together and they have a belief in something. I think truly, if you look at all the great philosophers or the people that wrote, the people that before us, the revolutionaries, the people that wanted to create change, and they talk about solidarity, and to have solidarity among young people to really put their minds together and join together and say, look, this is going to change. This is what's going to change, and come and go and force the president out. I think that was just the most amazing thing of the whole year.
Michael, you mentioned Angela Davis before. I wanted to go to a clip of her. This was the day after Donald Trump's inauguration. He had about 180,000 people at his inauguration. The next day, there was at least 3 times that number in Washington, not to mention the millions of people who were protesting all over the country. This is Angela Davis speaking at that protest.
Over the next months and years, we will be called upon to intensify our demands for social justice, to become more militant in our defense of vulnerable populations. Those who still defend the supremacy of white, male, heteropatriarchy had better watch out. The next 1,459 days of the Trump administration will be 1,459 days of resistance.
Angela Davis speaking on January 21st, the day after the inauguration of President Donald J. Trump. Michael Bennet, her significance in your life and your family's life in terms of being a model.
I think, she just to me, she just is just a. Besides my wife, I just love everything about her. I think when you have a person that speaks their mind, no matter what, regardless of the backlash and the things that she's been through. I mean, there's a lot of times that people talk to you, but they never been through anything, and they never really fought that fight. They just speak about it. But I think for her, she actually genuinely is on the ground daily. Her daily fight, her daily struggle, her daily everything is to make change in life, whether it's in Australia for women in jail, whether it's here for political prisoners, whether it's here for Black Lives Matter, whether it's in Palestine. It's just her whole life is about how to create change. And I think that's important. I think she just encourages me to be able to, really dedicate my life to trying to make change. And it really everything else doesn't really matter if there's always a system to keep certain people down. Nothing really matters if how many touchdowns I score if another black kid is shot and killed. Doesn't matter how many sacks I get if the education system is unfair for black youth or people of color youth. Doesn't matter how many times I hit Tom Brady or any other quarterback if there's a wall being built. You know what I mean? So. And she just gives me power to just go out there and just speak how I feel, also educate myself on the things. I mean, I think she's just a great role model for young women. Even if you don't agree with her message or you don't agree with the things that she says, but you can't disagree with her courage. You can't disagree with her ability to speak and make a movement. You can't disagree with her ability to organize. And I think that's what young people have to, really look up to her is how do we organize? How do we come together and try to create change? And I think with her doing all the things she's done, it just motivates us to just keep growing and know that there is a possibility that we can link up as people. Not when we're not even looking at color, we're just looking to link and connect as people and go and try to make change and not let the government do what they want to us. Give us a chance to go out there and just speak our mind. And get the young people to, take a step forward. I think she's just a courageous person, and I get goosebumps whenever I talk, whenever I talk to her, or if I just listen to her, the messages that she spoke, or if I'm just reading the book, and reading one of her books, it just motivates me.
As you talk about speaking up, what are your thoughts, finally, on the crackdown on immigrants right now, the attempt to build the wall on the southern border of the United States, and the Muslim ban? It's something that really President Trump has used to describe what took place.
I disagree with it all. I think, this country was built on immigrants. If you think from African Americans coming from Africa, being enslaved and building all the things that they built, the White House, all the things that they built, then you go to the Asians, they're here to build all the railroads, build all the things on the West Coast. The Spanish who built all these different things, and Native Americans who built all these different things through the labor and the backs of slaves and the labor of immigrants. And I think at this point, they should definitely not be kicked out because they're the ones who built this place.
Have you been surprised by all that President Trump has done in his first month in office, and also by the amount of resistance that he's faced all over the country?
No, I'm not surprised by the resistance. I think this is a time, and there's been so many different times where there's been so many times for movements, whether it's in the 60s, during World War II, or during Vietnam, or during all these different times, civil rights movements and all these movements. And I think this is a time where people are coming to the agreement that we are all just human beings, and we are all part of the system, and it takes all of us to grow. So the resistance to trying to divide us, no, I'm not surprised in it. I'm actually encouraged, and I'm just happy that everybody's starting to come together and have that full circle.
That's NFL star Michael Bennett. He plays defensive end for the Seattle Seahawks, speaking to us from Honolulu, Hawaii. Michael Bennett recently pulled out of an Israeli government-sponsored trip to Israel for NFL players. That does it for our broadcast. Democracy Now! Produced by Mike Burke, Carla Wills, Laura Gaddis-Diener, Dina Guzder, Sam Elkoff, Robbie Karen, Honey Massoud, Sharina Nadura, Andre Lewis. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.